So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'm delighted to be here at the InsurConnect event in sunny Gibraltar, not least, for me at least, because it's given me some respite from the back-to-back storms hitting the UK. 9 named storms we've had to date this winter, and that's been a bit challenging as a trade body. You can imagine we've been asked for comments several times about the response from the industry. I don't intend to speak for the whole 30 minutes that I've been allocated here, because I'd quite like to have questions at the end and get any comments from the audience, if that's okay, because I think that would be a better way of actually interacting. But I will give you some pre-prepared remarks, and then we can have a discussion after that, if that's okay. I'm excited, actually, to engage with the dynamic industry here in particular. It's my second trip to Gibraltar since taking on my current role of Director of General Insurance Policy at the ABI, which I took on just over a year ago. And I've been very, very welcomed and kindly welcomed, I think, by those of our members and those of you in the wider insurance ecosystem. What strikes me quite a bit about Gibraltar is the tenacity of the people I've met. Despite what is a very challenging global macroeconomic environment, Gibraltar's insurance industry has proven not only its resilience, but its ability to continue to grow. Last year, we saw several new regulatory approvals in the territory, and this year, I understand the GFC has said that it's managing the longest pipeline of insurance applications in the past decade. Clearly an exciting time for the industry, and we're very much glad to be a part of that. But it doesn't come without its challenges. Given the importance of Gibraltar to the UK's motor insurance market, as has been highlighted several times this morning, many of you will be aware of the cost pressures that the industry is facing. In fact, many of you are probably feeling them too, to be fair. At the ABI, we track these market dynamics in detail, and we'll be releasing Q4 2023 data in the coming days. I can't talk about those yet, but if we look back at previous quarters, we can see the cost pressures. Those cost pressures stem from the increasing cost of labour, energy and parts, often significantly above the headline inflation rate, and that's very hard actually for members of the public to understand. It's above the headline inflation rate, which is a mix of course, of many different things. And then when you add to that the delays from supply chain challenges and other behavioural challenges, these costs are increasingly hard for the industry to absorb. What's interesting is at the same time, we're under quite significant scrutiny from government, regulators, the media and the public on the affordability of motor insurance, and that continues to mount. In the first few weeks of this year, there have been headlines and articles in all of the UK national media outlets on increases in motor premiums. Yesterday alone, while I was here, we had to give comments on 2 articles from the national newspapers, and there were others which didn't even ask for industry comment. They just went out and said, premiums are rising too fast, this is a problem. Motor affordability is clearly a priority for us at the ABI and our members, and we are working with a group of those members to understand what we can do to address the affordability challenges. And we'll be setting out more information on that in due course. Looking at what can be done to take some of the cost pressures out of the market is also a key focus. Here there are challenges for the industry, for regulators and for government policy. We are developing a 10-point roadmap at the moment, and among other things, we are closely monitoring the review of the personal injury discount rate, the review of the whiplash tariffs, and the outcome of the Supreme Court hearing on mixed injuries to see how these challenges could impact the market in 2024. As we have heard and seen over a period of time now, the FCA has indicated they are not happy with certain elements of the motor insurance market, including gap insurance, premium finance, and motor invaluations. And of course, they're very focused on consumer duty right now, and I'll come back to that in a bit. On the government side, we have engaged with successive Conservative governments, but now we're edging ever closer to a potential election in the autumn that could shake up the status quo considerably. Recent press releases from Labour have signalled that they intend to look into the cost of motor insurance if they are elected. The numbers they quoted were quite frightening. They talked about reducing insurance by £400. On the basis, the average premium that we calculated through fourth quarter 2023 was $560. That's a big number, something we have to think about carefully. There is, of course, something that government could do to help almost immediately, whether it's a Labour government or a Conservative government, and that's to reduce IPT. You may have seen announced in the press this morning that IPT generated $6.1 billion for the first 3 quarters of the financial year. So if you extrapolate that, that would suggest they're raising $8 billion for IPT over the year. That's huge. And if you think about the way premium tax works, it's a percentage base, obviously, higher premiums, higher IPT. So the government has collected more in IPT in the last 6 to 9 months than it would have done in previous years. So that's a little bit about the market that it is right now, and these are very pressing issues that we're very focused on. But we also have to carve out some time to think about the way forward and to stay competitive on the global stage. We're very pleased to see that the Automated Vehicles Bill was passed through the committee stages at the House of Lords and will continue to engage with the Bill team as it progresses. It's critical to make sure that insurers have access to relevant data to support the safe deployment of automated vehicles. On electric vehicles, the industry continues to play a critical role in the decarbonisation of the transportation sector. However, key challenges remain related to the repair of EVs and a lack of best practice around the recycling of EV batteries. On behalf of our members, we are engaging with vehicle manufacturers and government to understand how feasible or commercially viable some of those proposed solutions are. As we've been hearing, the concept of captives is very, very important, and generally the concept of the way young people look at buying motor insurance has changed, right? There's also a change in the concept of how vehicle ownership might move forward. Vehicle subscription services, car sharing, car hubs, new types of vehicle categories like micromobility are all issues that are going to challenge the current model. With all of these developments, it's no surprise that many people think that actually this is one of the most difficult times to be in the insurance industry. But I would say actually it's also one of the most exciting times to be in the insurance industry, particularly in the motor industry perhaps, because there's a lot of change, there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of opportunity for change. Gibraltar is playing a significant role and will be crucial to helping the industry solve the dilemma of customers struggling with affordability at the same time as industry making losses. Very, very important. At this point, I just want to pause for a moment and maybe take you back to something I've just said and make sure you actually heard what I said. I said that insurance is exciting. Do we believe that? Do we believe that as an audience, as an industry? Because it is. It's a very exciting place to be, and I just think we need to be a bit better at making those points outside of the industry. Not just across motor, not just across any part of the industry in particular, but the whole of the industry. Insurance is exciting. Let's just think about that for a moment and make sure we take that away with us, because I think we need to say that more often. I was reminded last night in various discussions on the breadth of skills that we have on show in the industry, and we need to shout this from the rooftops. If we don't do that, we can't attract the best talent into the industry. If we don't attract the best talent into the industry, where's the future? So, let's start now. Insurance is exciting. If I say it enough, maybe we'll actually start believing it. You know, it's an exciting place to be, and we need to do that more often. There is a dynamism here in Gibraltar, and the industry needs to be more visible globally and to get that excitement out there. And as the industry in Gibraltar continues to grow, it makes it even more important to create opportunities both here and in the UK to work together. There's a whole host of issues that can only be addressed if we are able to speak with a united voice. And we will continue to work closely with associations here in Gibraltar to build out cooperation. I'm going to turn now to a few other areas that we're focused on at the ABI, and then we'll open for questions and hopefully get a conversation going. And maybe we can even talk about how exciting insurance is. So let's talk a little bit about climate change. The insurance and long-term savings sector aims to reach net zero with its own directly controlled operations by 2025. By 2030, we aim to engage proactively with suppliers to include supply chain emissions within the scope of the sector's target. Additionally, the industry has a key role to play in providing the investment capacity that will be needed to phase out carbon-intensive activities and replace them with sustainable and renewable innovations. Another aspect of work in climate change is to make our built environments more resilient. We must recognise the importance of mitigating against hotter summers, a higher risk of flooding, more extreme weather events, and problems caused by older infrastructure and housing that was designed for cooler temperatures. I wonder how many people in the room would have had any thought of there being a tornado in Manchester between Christmas and New Year. That certainly had an impact on my holiday plans. I'm sure it did for many of you in the room as well. But a tornado in Manchester, which affected 100 homes and did significant damage, that's not something perhaps we would have seen in the past. So it's something we have to learn about, right, and make sure we understand how events are going to change our business model. As highlighted by the Minister and by earlier panels, we want the insurance and long-term savings industry to be a diverse, equitable and inclusive sector We want the people who work in insurance and long-term savings across all parts of the UK and Gibraltar to reflect and represent the communities we serve. Enhancing diversity within the sector not only fosters competitiveness, but also helps us to attract and retain the very best talent. I'm back again, talent. Insurance is exciting. I think that's the message, right? And for the consumer base, we want to extend similar DEI principles to ensure that every single customer gets the fair treatment and respect they deserve. This isn't just a regulatory requirement, it's part of our duty, right? Next area we're focused on is systemic risks. Systemic risks are quite a difficult area for the industry by definition, but we need to make our industry more resilient to systemic risk, such as future pandemics and cyber attacks. I was struck by the presentation earlier this morning about Gibraltar through time and the fact that there was a big focus on what happened during the pandemic, right? It was difficult. And we had a difficult time as an industry at that time as well. You know, not necessarily in the retail side, but certainly in business interruption. It was a tough time. So we need to be ready for that. We need to be ready for future pandemics. We need to be ready for cyber attacks. Cybers have been mentioned a couple of times already. And there may be other perils out there we don't have on our risk register right now that we need to think about. So we must learn from previous experience, COVID obviously being one of them, and we must leverage the world-leading expertise and forward-thinking nature that we have both in the UK and Gibraltar. Risk assessment and risk management are crucial in that, and we need to focus on that very much. The next topic is Solvency UK. There's been some discussions already about the new regime. One of the things I wanted to highlight was that actually, unlike Solvency II, only a very small part of Solvency UK will be contained in legislation. The vast majority of the retained EU legislation will be transferred into the PRA's rulebook, giving the regulator considerable influence over the direction of the regime. That's pretty important. Yeah? If the regulator's got the ability to react and to do things in a different way, and it's in the rulebook rather than in the legislation, they have flexibility. In that area, a key issue is going to be the competitiveness objective. That's a hard thing to say. Competitiveness objective of the regulators, and the interaction between Gibraltar and the UK will be crucial in that. I said I'd come back to consumer duty. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it's, you know, we have been talking about it for some time now. The implementation is now almost 6 months in, and there clearly are important learnings to be shared, particularly when it comes to price and value. Along with the regulator's earlier intervention on general insurance value assessments, the duty is clear about product value. Firms must demonstrate what customers are getting for their money overall. What we're seeing is that manufacturers, again, I'm not sure I really like that term, but that's the term the regulators use for carriers, manufacturers. They are particularly having some difficulties demonstrating how they're providing fair value to the end customer. This is particularly the case when there's long and complicated distribution change. And this is something we're working very closely with members on. Lastly, on regulation, we're also monitoring, of course, the progress of the GAR here. And as the transitional arrangement comes to the end of this year, at the end of this year, we need to think about that too. The last topic I was going to mention is artificial intelligence. It's becoming increasingly commonplace across a variety of public and commercial services. The risk associated with bias in these systems has become a growing concern. The government in the UK has recently published a white paper on AI regulation. It identifies fairness as one of 5 proposed key regulatory principles to guide and inform the responsible development and use of AI. So we need to think about that too as an industry. How is AI going to help us? Is it going to be a problem in terms of claims information? Very important area for us all to focus on. So I've highlighted there just a very small subset of the issues that the ABI is currently working on. What's immediately apparent is that the challenges presented can't be solved alone. And there I think the strength through association is very, very important. We recognise the need to engage with the entire industry, both here and at home. There are challenges, but there are also opportunities. We're constantly reminded that engagement with Gibraltar is crucial. The territory's entrepreneurial environment and agile regulator create a seedbed for innovation. I'm really looking forward to having further discussions with you all today, whether it be here, while I'm standing up here, or in coffee or lunch breaks, because I think it's really, really important that we have that link and we work together. And I'm very encouraged by the discussions I've already had on the the new connections I've already made. I really hope you enjoy the whole of the event. I'll certainly be taking advantage of being in a bit of a warmer climate for a bit, and obviously the warm company as well. I'm very, very happy to take some questions now, or I guess if you really just don't want to speak to me and you want to take an early lunch, that's good as well, and you can speak to me individually. Thank you.
Thanks, Mervyn. And I completely agree that insurance is exciting.
Thank you.
But I am an actuary, so just need to filter through that lens. Any questions for Mervyn? Oh, yeah, got one here. Oh, hang on. I'll go here and then I'll come to you.
Sure. Thank you for that. Very interesting on many fronts, and I'm very excited about insurance. So how is Gibraltar perceived by the ABI? And if you have a perception also with Lloyd's, what do they think about Gibraltar?
So my personal perception is that it's a territory we need to work together with, and it's part of the overall eco-structure of what's happening across the world, right? So my background is more in the specialty area. I spent a lot of time in Bermuda over the years, and I can see some similarities. Different types of market, different types of risks. But what's happened over the years is that Bermuda has become a really, really important part of the overall global ecostructure, and I think Gibraltar's moving in that direction and needs to be part of it going forward. We've heard that many times already this morning. So I think the perception has changed over the years, if I'm honest, and I think it's pretty strong right now. I think the days have gone where it's one country or one group of countries where all the capital is. That's just not realistic anymore. You know, if you look on the reinsurance side, you've probably got 4 or 5 major hubs around the world, and they're all symbiotic, right? They work together. You're not going to have all the capacity in London. So, I think the London market has started to accept that actually there's a great link between them and other parts of the world on the specialty side and on the retail side. If a jurisdiction is writing 30% of the motor market, I think it's time for it to be taken seriously in the right way, honestly.
Thank you very much, Mervyn. Really fascinating keynote. And I think everyone in this room would agree that insurance is exciting.
I've started a trend.
With the recent news that Amazon is pulling out of insurance, do you think Amazon found insurance too exciting?
Good question. I don't have all the facts of what Amazon were doing or why they pulled out, but it strikes me as I think about it that insurance isn't straightforward, right? It's not just a question of turning up, writing a policy, paying a claim, and going away again, right? There's a lot of major impacts involved with insurance, whether it be getting capital, whether it be providing a service, etc. And in some respects, Amazon is used to delivering something physical, right? So if you order something on Amazon the night before, then if you've got Amazon Prime, normally it arrives the next morning. It may get delivered to the wrong house, but it tends to arrive the next morning. And that's harder with services, right? So I just wonder if they found it harder to sell services. But they possibly found it a little bit harder to write business in a profitable way than they realized.
Thanks, Mervyn. Probably quite a simple question. You touched on the changes that have come through to the solvency regime in the UK. And I noticed that you specifically referred to it as Solvency UK.
Yeah.
We've recently taken those changes on board, and one of our clients is a non-UK domiciled company, and one of their concerns or questions was, will it still be continue to be known as Solvency II in the UK, or is it going to be renamed to Solvency UK? Because from a perspective of an EU domiciled client, they are quite keen to ensure that there is still quite a bit of alignment between the two regimes. So, simple question: is it going to be officially renamed Solvency UK?
I don't know about officially, but everyone's calling it Solvency UK for sure. There's an even worse way of looking at that. If you shorten that SUKS, I'll let you work out what that means.
Thank you, Mervyn. Just a very quick question looking forward. How do you, from an ABI perspective, see blockchain interfacing with insurance?
Okay, so I will say up front, I'm not an expert on blockchain, so I'm not sure I can answer that question with any great knowledge, to be honest with you. I think it's something we need to focus on more, but it's not something we've spent a huge amount of time looking at this point in time. So I'm sorry, I'll have to pass on that question because I don't have the information to answer it.
Any more questions? Yep.
Just a quick question on your thoughts on consumer duty and sort of the focus the government currently has. Have we come as far as we should with consumer duty, or do you think there's still sort of more regulation and more focus to come here? A feeling, or a very high level feeling, is that perhaps we're sort of pushing a bit too far on something we should have addressed in the past, and will slightly adjust and sort of deregulate slightly.
I think you've seen it many times over the years, not just with regulation, but more generally, that when a pendulum swings all the way one way, it goes a little bit too far sometimes, and then swings all the way back, swings a little bit back again. I don't think necessarily that's the way the FCA are looking at it. I think they see consumer duty as a really important part of their regulatory toolbox, and many of the discussions that they're having right now do focus on fair value, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. So maybe the pendulum will strike back at some point, but I don't see it in the short term. I think the FCA is very, very focused on fair value and fair value across the whole chain, and that makes it complicated for insurers who may not have control over the whole distribution chain.
Mervyn, I would love to agree with you that insurance is exciting. Maybe I've been around the block too many times. My view is that an exciting industry is one which encourages enterprise.
Yep.
Do you feel that the volume and degree of regulation on insurance is now stifling that enterprise?
I hope not. I genuinely hope not, because I agree with you that the entrepreneurial part of the industry that's, has seen industry write new lines of business across many, many, many years is crucial, right, for the industry to thrive. I do think there is some feeling that regulation can stifle some forms of entrepreneurial activity. It's not meant to do that, I don't think. I think it's meant to, make sure the industry does what it's supposed to do, right? And that's ultimately, if you go take it back to its absolute basics, right? What is insurance? It's a promise to pay, isn't it? It's a promise to pay at a certain event. Hopefully, it's always a covered event and not paying when it's not quite a covered event, but it's meant to be covering a covered event. I personally think that we've probably lost sight a little bit as an industry as to that purpose of insurance, and sometimes the regulator gets involved because of that. We need to go back and think about what it is we're selling. Most people, when they buy an insurance policy, we were talking about this last night, they put it in a drawer and they hope to forget about it and never see it again, because it's buying something that is, they only need in an emergency, and that's quite hard sometimes because people are struggling to understand the benefit of insurance. So I think if we could get better as an industry at explaining why insurance is so important and what it does, then perhaps the regulator wouldn't have to get so much involved on the back end. And obviously, the more entrepreneurial we can be in getting that message across, the better.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. I'll disagree with you, Chris, because I work for an InsurTech, so it's super exciting. And that's really my question. So how do the traditional insurers see InsurTechs in the UK? Do they see us as a threat, a challenge, or is it something that's going to motivate them to do things differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a mix of everything you've just said, right? I think to say it's one thing would probably be wrong. But again, the way we focus on it is we want to link the two things together, right? So Melissa and I have started having conversations about how we can see InsurTech and those members of InsurTech Association now becoming, if they get a full license in the future, if that's their path, then they would become members of the ABI. So that working together, I think, is very, very important. But I also think that there will be some in the industry who see it as a threat. That's understandable. But sometimes if you see something as a threat, then you do something about it, right? You try to mitigate that threat. And there's two ways of mitigating the threat. Either you work with someone or you work against them. So I'm hoping that it's working with people to. Going back to the previous question, if we're looking to be more entrepreneurial and there are ideas out there, then why shouldn't we embrace them?
Okay. Thank you, Mervyn. That was really interesting, the word of the day. Thank you.
Pleasure.